So I know I did a video on this earlier, and I kind of just jumped right into it because I was so excited. I didn't think about explaining how to adjust, how to, really go about setting this thing up. So I'm going to do that today. I'm also going to explain the stones because I also felt like that I didn't do a very good job of that either. We're also going to do a little bit of knife sharpening and show you the actual potential of this because I sharpened this knife here, which the steel on this knife is actually so soft that you can't get a really nice edge. You can get it sort of sharp, but you can't get it really sharp. I tried off camera and on camera, and I got it as sharp as I could get it on camera. So we're going to use a knife that I know can get sharp. It's got a few problems with it, and we'll talk about those. But we'll first talk about setup and making sure that you know how to use all the adjustments on this thing. So the first adjustment that I want to talk about is this one right here. And this is the tilt of the table. So the table can tilt this way, and it can tilt this way, and it can also tilt in this way and this way. It's like a shoulder joint. See, it's got this little ball here, so you can rotate it left to right and back and forth this way and up down. I always tighten this puppy all the way down because I don't want this table to move at all. So I tighten it down so that I don't have it rock back this way like this when I'm sharpening it. So that's one thing I don't want to happen, so I make sure this one's really tight. This one is a height adjuster, so it's controlled by this knob here, and it's just a little bar that runs up here. You can loosen it, adjust the height down, and then set that one. This one really doesn't matter as long as you have this one tight, but this is nice to have. Sometimes it gives you a second point of contact. This is your angle selector here. So what this does is this makes it, you can see I've got like a green and a yellow notches there, and you'll feel those when you're tightening this down or sliding it past. You'll feel a toot, toot, toot. It's a technical term, but you'll feel those go by. That's to give you an idea. Of course, every knife is going to be sharpened to a different angle, so that's a little bit of play. I covered that in my last video. And then there's a length of throw adjuster here, so if you need a little more or a little less, so that way would be a little more and this way would be a little less. If you're using bigger or smaller knives, it's only going to give you a 1/4 inch of throw, but it can be helpful. Oh, and if you loosen this too much, it'll fall off, and that just makes a whole big mess because it's barely attached over on this side with just a little screw. This is your table adjustment. I think I explained that pretty well. So that's if you're using a very wide knife. That's if you're using a very not wide knife, so a very thin knife. And width this way. So this would be considered a thin knife, and then something like an axe, you would slide all the way back to here. And then you would put the axe on the table. We're going to be working on a mediumly thick knife today, and we'll go into stone selection next. So stone selection, I didn't really go into it because I was excited just to get this. I actually sharpened this knife, was the first knife that I sharpened on this table, so was really excited about it, and I didn't even think about going through it. So if you're new to sharpening stones, they have grades, and this is and the grade that they give them is kind of like teeth per inch measurement, or like roughness, like sandpaper. I don't know how sandpaper is necessarily graded. I forget if it's like teeth per inch or if it's like grains per inch, per square inch that is. Stones are the same way. So this one is 120. So it's got 120 grains per square inch. This one here is a 320. So it's a little more than a third, as aggressive as this one. The third stone is a 600 grit, so about half as aggressive as the one before, and the final one is a 1500, and the 1500 is a little less than 3 times as aggressive as the one before it. So you can kind of see each grade is about 3 times or a little less than 3 times as aggressive as the one before it. So to put it in perspective, every stroke you make with this one, we'll take off 3 times as much material as this one, and 9 times as much material as this one, and then 18 times as much as this one. Anyways, we'll get on to sharpening this knife. So, and we'll talk about it. So, this knife here is somewhat sharp, but looking at it, I can see there are chips missing out of the blade. So what that means is you want your blade to be, this is a piece of paper, you want your blade to be perfectly even along it. Of course, we're not talking about serrations. This is a smooth-sided blade, so you don't want dips out of it, because what's going to happen is you're going to be cutting along, and you're going to hit that knock, and it's going to stop. So you'll cut along, and then it'll go. So I'll explain that and I'll kind of show. We'll see if I can get it to happen here. Hopefully my mic is good enough to hear this, but did you hear that? You might have heard it go. It's a perfect shh and then shh kind of noise. So you don't want that to happen. You want to get those little nicks out of it, because that's going to really hamper your cutting ability. Now, I said this knife was not that dull, but certainly those nicks will cause problems. All right, here we go. So start out with the 120. The other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you get this little guy wet enough so that he seals down properly. I didn't get him wet enough here. That's on me, to make sure that he seals down. So move that around, throw the lever, and he should be sealed real good now. Okay. What I did is I picked the biggest areas and the biggest nicks out of it. So there's a section here that had some really large nicks in it, and there's a section here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking those out. I don't know, I had something in my beard there. Anyways, I'm taking those nicks out, and the reason I'm not sharpening the whole blade is because you don't want to remove so much material that you have created a whole new bevel. You're just trying to focus on the problem areas. And what that should do is that should get it to the same angle, because we're using a fixed angle sharpener, and it should remove the least amount of material. Now, in extreme cases, if these were really, really large nicks, like they came, I'll use this hand, they came in and they came up here quite a ways into the thicker part of the steel and then went back down, where you have some serious blade damage, I would certainly say then sharpen down. But I really don't want to create a whole new edge. I just want to maintain the one that I have. Okay, so all of the nicks that I've been looking at have been getting much, much smaller. And that feels sharp. It's definitely got some nicks in it yet, but oh, I found a nick. But you can see for the majority of that how smooth that is. You don't see any hairs. That's what we would call a sharp knife. And we're only at the 600, excuse me, the 300. So go to the 600 now. There, now you can hear the difference. Almost. You can, of course, go to the infinite degree. You can go to the 1500. This is a user knife, though. This knife gets used quite a bit, and it does dull, but that's why you have the system. Once you notice it gets dull, you get back on it and hop on the stone and sharpen her back up. I think you use the 1500 if you're doing, like, if you want that knife to be razor sharp all the time, and that's your maintaining tool. So you're not constantly, because every time you go up a stone, it's going to take you quite a bit more time to get it to that razor edge. So once you do get it there, maintaining that, you can use a much smaller stone, or a much less aggressive stone, I should say, than if you were creating an edge or fixing an edge like we were doing here. that's just my 2 cents on it. You can always take it down to 1500. I prefer not to use the 1500 unless, like I said, you're working with something that needs to be extremely sharp, like a fillet knife or something along those lines, where you're doing really delicate work and you don't want to put a lot of effort into your blade. For me, my pocket knives, I think I go to the 320 or the 600 grit stone, depending on how picky and finicky I want it to be. But most pocket knives, I only go to the 320 grit. So, anyways, now that I've rambled on enough, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this is very helpful. I know I jumped into it real fast. With the first one, I didn't explain anything, and that's because I was super excited to get a hold of it. Because I know a lot of people struggle with getting a perfect edge, and I see this more of a tool that you can really use at home in a controlled environment. I will still, of course, use a stone, freestanding stone, in my own time. But this is more of a travel system to me. Is like, you're out in the field, you're cleaning fish, and your knife gets dull because you caught a bunch. It's always a good day when that happens. But you got to touch up the edge. That's what that stone's for. You come home, maybe you hit a couple too many bones, you took a nick out of the edge, and now you want to make sure you get the right angle and you don't remove too much steel or something along those lines. That's what this is for. Or I found a fillet knife last year while trout fishing, and the guy took a grinder to the edge. I think he took a 6-inch fillet knife and turned it into a 4-inch fillet knife, and so correcting that, I had to reprofile the entire thing, and I had to do that by hand. That was a pain in the butt. This would have been awesome to do that on, because you have a controlled environment, and especially if you're not very good with your right hand or your left hand, you can control the angle on this all the time. So it's very easy to get a consistent edge, which consistency is everything when you're trying to make something that is so even on both sides and sharp. So I've rambled on long enough. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope you go out and you pick one of these up, because they're a lot of fun, they're not very expensive, and they're a great way to get your knife very sharp.